US President Donald Trump is in Beijing for a high-stakes two-day visit and is set to meet his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. Well, they are expected to discuss a range of thorny issues including Tehran, Taiwan and trade. Well, Trump's first official engagement will be an arrival ceremony with Xi at Beijing's Great Hall of the People. The two leaders will then hold talks. A state banquet is scheduled for the evening. Trump arrived for the summit on Air Force One late Wednesday night, accompanied by top administrative officials and several of the country's most powerful executives, including Nvidia's Jensen Huang and Tesla's Elon Musk. He was given a red carpet welcome with 300 Chinese youth chanting welcome and waving Chinese and US flags as he descended the steps of the presidential plane, pumping his fist. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said it welcomes Trump's visit, adding the Beijing stands ready to work with US to expand cooperation and manage differences. But Trump is dealing with a different China to the one he visited 9 years ago, with a host of unresolved trade and geopolitical tensions between the two countries. The Iran war in particular has threatened to weaken Trump's position in talks with Xi, having already forced him to postpone it from the month of March. Well, the US president said he expected a long talk with Xi about Iran, which sells most of its US-sanctioned oil to China, but insisted that he doesn't think US needs any help with Iran from Beijing. On Taiwan, another issue that has strained ties, well, Trump said he would speak to Xi about US arms sales to the self-governing democracy claimed by China. That would be a departure from historic US insistence that it will not consult Beijing on its support for the island, and one which will be closely watched by Taipei and US allies in the region. Not to forget trade. Well, the long simmering trade war between the two countries will be, after all, the top of the agenda after Trump's sweeping tariffs last year, which triggered tit-for-tat levies that exceeded 100%. Trump and Xi are set to discuss extending a one-year tariff truce, which the two leaders reached during their last meeting in South Korea in October, although a deal is far from certain. And for more on this, we are now being joined by our correspondent, Susan Tehrani, live from New York. And to discuss more, we are being joined by Daniel Roth. He is a research director for United Against Nuclear Iran. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today. Susan, I'll first get to you. Well, what are we actually expecting from the summit today?
You know, this summit really comes at a time when both sides are very clear-eyed about the goals and the deliverables. It seems that the summit is mainly about managing expectations about competition and not solving it really. And analysts ultimately believe that while there will be a lot of symbolic diplomacy and also efforts to stabilize ties, we aren't really going to see major breakthroughs. But in the area of trade, we might see some deliverables. So it'll be interesting to watch, as you mentioned, the issue of Iran, the cloud of war is really hovering over this meeting, which is Trump's first visit to Beijing after he made a visit as U.S. president almost 10 years ago. And, President Biden really didn't visit China during that time. So it has a significance there. But you have the Strait of Hormuz on the one hand. You have the issue of Taiwan. Of course, for the president, trade remains central in their negotiations. And of course, the issue of artificial intelligence as well. China ultimately wants a predictable relationship with the United States, and the United States, with the president traveling with a delegation of tech CEOs, really wants to see China open up its business to these brilliant minds, as the White House likes to say.
Right, and Susan, can you please tell us more about how markets in the United States are reacting the summit is about to start in some hours from now on. So how do you think the markets are reacting to the summit between Trump and his counterpart Xi Jinping?
Well, the stock market closed high this afternoon. We are at around 8:30 p.m. local time right now. There is a sense of optimism because of this trip. However, the issue of the Strait of Hormuz ultimately really remains a sticking point. While markets haven't really reacted significantly to that, but we did see earlier today that they were sort of volatile. But they're doing very well, notably the S&P 500.
Right. Now I'll shift towards Daniel Roth. Well, Daniel, can you tell me how crucial is this Trump-Xi summit at a time when, global markets are already under pressure from the West Asia conflict and rising oil prices?
Yeah, I think broadly Susan's probably right. I'd be surprised if there was any major breakthrough on the Iran front. But having said that, China is one of the very, very few countries in the world that could potentially affect Iranian strategy, one of the few countries that can pressure Iran just due to its huge economic ties. The fact that Iran exports 90% plus, and in fact, that's rising of its oil to the Chinese mainland. And that accounts for a significant portion of the total Iranian government budget. So I think Trump, and we heard earlier Marco Rubio, who's kind of preparing the way, is very well aware that China could play a potential ameliorating role, let's call it, in this crisis. Clearly, both the US and China, they want the same thing in terms of the Strait of Hormuz. They both want stability on global markets. It's just a question of they have a different method of going about it. China doesn't really care about US stock markets. In fact, is probably happy that the US stock markets experience volatility. But then again, because of the intertwined nature of the global economy, it still needs the US to buy all its goods. And those goods are, as we see, largely manufactured through this cheap Iranian discounted oil. So fascinating to see what happens the next day or so.
Right, and Daniel, Trump has said that he wants China to open up further for American firms. Well, what exactly is Washington hoping to achieve economically from this visit?
Well, the president is interested in, obviously, American economic strength, and China is interested in Chinese economic strength. I'm not sure whether that is really one of his main priorities. I think, since 2016, when he first became president, he's always talked about onshoring US manufacturing, and that would preclude business in China or US investment in China. Certainly, the key Chinese exports, the key Chinese materials that the US does need, particularly for its military industrial complex, are these rare earth materials, gallium, for instance, which is absolutely crucial for US missiles, that kind of thing. So I think Trump will try to just get what the US explicitly needs in these kind of rare earth materials. He'll look for China to pressure Iran on the Strait of Hormuz. But beyond that, I'm not sure that there'll be anything major.